Does yours work?
Can you
Yes.
hear me? Yes.
Sí, ahora sí. Okay, so yeah, thanks Heather, Brian, for joining me. I think the topic is quite interesting. So let's get on to it because we have, I think, 10, 20 minutes. So the first question is, the logo. Why change it? What was the idea behind it?
Okay, well, we'd already been on a roll thinking about what we were doing with our branding and how we could become more global, move towards a global brand, which was kind of difficult when we have 5 major markets which had sub-brands. So that was one of the main reasons. Secondly, we were seeing that internally we have like a huge push to become super digital. But then we were seeing that our logo and all our visual identity wasn't keeping up to space with that change. And then also we had a logo which hadn't been retouched for the last 25 years. So to talk about becoming a leading digital player with that logo was kind of out of sync.
I think it looks fantastic.
Thank
so
you.
congrats. The second question here is actually, BBVA is a huge enterprise. So, what are the steps involved, to plan and prepare for this kind of project?
Okay, well, as you can imagine, to move an organization of over 130,000 employees is not an easy task. So first of all, I think the most important thing to get started was having internal buy-in from the top management. So once we had that, then we did like a roadshow, kind of like the Rolling Stones, to all our countries to explain what the project was about, what were the objectives, and also let people say, well, I'm fantastic in Mexico as BBVA Bancomer. I don't need to change. I don't need to become BBVA. So just listening to people, letting them express their concerns, talking about their barriers, and then doing market research. That was critical because to push the organization to make such a change to become a single global brand, which has a huge investment, as you can imagine, well, you're not going to do that without having some figures that are saying, Brian and I think we should do this, but we're going to do our best not to destroy the business. So we did lots of market research. Once we had that case that was saying, okay, we're good to go, we came back to global and we started to set up the teams and then mirroring those teams in the local countries.
Yeah, I think that part was actually one of the most important parts from the execution of the logo is we put together a design team of designers in our different local teams, so it wasn't just coming out of holding. We obviously had a presence within our global team, but we also had a designer working on it in the United States, in Mexico, in Colombia, and we all worked together. So ultimately, when we launched the logo, everyone already had seen it, they felt like they were part of the process, and they felt really proud of the final result, which was really key.
And this was happening from Madrid. This was all organized from Madrid, right?
Yes.
Yeah, nice. Okay. The next question would be, whenever you redesign something in a huge company like this, what were the objectives behind it, Brian?
Sure. I mean, as Heather said, when we went around to the different countries, obviously we had to explain the objectives of the logo change. We had just, in 2017, we had launched a new brand purpose. So obviously we wanted to make sure that the new identity represented the new brand purpose that we had in terms of creating opportunities. We were in a big strategic movement in digital transformation. So that was another really big objective, that the logo represented digital transformation. And then finally, when you think of it from a manual part or an executional part, when we're designing and putting so much focus on our digital products, we wanted to make sure that this was from a digital first approach and making sure that the logo scaled really nicely across all of our digital touch points, which can come from very, very small to really large.
I guess that a lot of people here could be asking, it's just a logo, but I guess that there's a design process behind it, and how long did that process take? How
Yeah.
was that process?
I mean, it probably took from the very first sketch on paper around 2.5 months. As I said, we put together an international team across our different countries. We worked both remotely for part of the time, and then we ultimately designed the final logo in Madrid. We brought everyone from the different local teams to Madrid for a week. We stayed in a room for 1 week, making the final decisions. But from start to end, it was probably about 2.5 months, and then obviously once you have, this wasn't the only logo that we came up with. We had 3 really, really strong proposals out of that 2.5 months, and then that's when you start to create all the material needed to both sell it into the executives, but also to create all the material to test with users.
Heather, so Brian was saying that you had 2 or 3 proposals, but how do you make that final decision? How do you decide on the final logo?
Well, it wasn't an easy choice because you can imagine with something as creative as a logo, everybody has an opinion. So you had like 150,000 people having an opinion about what the choice should be. So
We did not share it with the
but we
entire
didn't share it
organization.
with the whole organization. No, it eventually was. It was a data-driven choice because it was we're a data-driven organization. So if we're going to make a huge investment, change our logo, it had to be a data-driven choice also. So we tested, I think, about 5,000 consumers who are clients and non-clients in our major markets. And what we looked for was that the logo, this new logo, obviously it had to perform better against the existing logo. It also had to reinforce what we stand for today, that we're a strong, solid financial institution. But also it has to talk about where we're moving forward, what we're talking about in the future. It has to talk about creating opportunities. And it has to make a bold statement about who's BBVA in the markets.
Yeah, I think this phase of the project was one of the biggest lessons that I learned. And I had designed many logos beforehand, but never at this scale. And the way that we made this decision, really based in data, like you said, a lot of times when you see a new logo and across these 3 choices that we had, people had different preferences. Obviously, logo is a very emotional thing. And when you see it for the first time, you typically have these emotions and these preferences toward one or the other. And in the end, what we saw was all 3 tested better than the old logo. So we knew we had a winner, and that was the good part. But deciding between the 3 was really important. And at the end, what we decided was we would make the decision based in the strategic intent of the organization. Our strategic intent for BBVA is we want to digitally transform. So it was the logo that best represented transformation, innovation, digital, those aspects that ultimately helped us make the final decision. And that was really important, something that was really impactful for me to see.
Heather, so after designing the logo, there's obviously a whole new identity to the to BBVA. So how do you implement and plan for that new identity?
Yeah, well, it's not easy. First of all, one of the major things we had to deal with was actually fixing a launch date, which changed several times. So once we had that launch date, so that D-Day, which was 15th of June, then it's retro timing, moving backwards. Before getting the calendars ready, we had to decide. So we'd set the day 15th of June, but maybe we were in February. So it was, what can we do? What is achievable from February until June that will make an impact? So we had like tiers of materials and achievables. So the first ones were obviously, our corporate buildings, our headquarters, we can't launch with a global campaign on the 15th of June, and then you go to La Vela, and the logo's not changed. That cannot happen. So that was one of them. We need to have our principal branches changed. We need to have our principal web pages where clients are interacting, they're doing their transactions. Those should be changed. The global campaign needs to be ready, and then phase 2, the other things. I mean, we're still
screen of the application.
rolling out, for example.
Yeah.
All the things that were really critical critical touch points with high impact for users.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think this works now, so I'm gonna shut this one. So Brian, you were talking about testing with with people, with real people, right? But what about the public? What do they think? That it's very important. Like the brand has to impact the public. So what was the decision there?
Sure. I mean, I think, like I said, logos are very emotional. They can be very, people can love them and people can hate them and people can be neutral about them. For us, it was really important that it was something that made an impact. So we didn't want people to be neutral. We wanted, and we knew that we were going to hear people that really did not like the logo and people that loved the logo. And for us, that was great. And I think, and also, people always think about or have an association of something new to something that they've seen. So you always hear, I think I've seen this, or something similar to this logo. All these comments are very natural to hear. But for us, what was really important is that through all of this noise, both the negative, positive, and the associations with other brands in some part of the world, that we knew that we made the decision based on our brand purpose, which is uniquely ours, and it's 4 letters that are uniquely ours. So because of that, we weren't really worried and we didn't really get stressed out about all of the different comments that we heard. But also, I think what we did really nice was when we heard comments, we entered into the conversation. It was a lot of the material that we created with the brand team.
I mean, we had like some really, really funny comments from the design community, which was, this A going up, I can't deal with it, I need everything to be organized. It's really driving me crazy. So it was like, okay, what can you do? You can be pissed off about that comment, or you can go, well, yeah, he's probably right, but let's have a laugh at ourselves. So we did a lot of short videos on redes sociales, and we just kind of took a laugh at ourselves and enjoyed the feedback.
Yeah. I mean, obviously for everyone here, that decision was very deliberate. The raising of the A. It represents prosperity, moving to an elevated level of life, which is very, very connected to our brand purpose. So we knew it would spark a lot of comments, but for us, it very, very much represents our strategic intent and also our brand purpose, why we exist.
Great, sounds great. I think it's bold, and I think people like it. So, okay, so after such a huge effort, how do you keep the brand alive and interesting in a bank?
Yeah, in a bank. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're lucky because we love our job, so. And we love the new logo, we love the work we're doing, but I think it's a change of mindset. Before people if you're people here working in branding or marketing, before it was very much, establishing rules, creating guidelines, and then they don't change, for the next 10 years. That can't happen anymore. Our guidelines are really short, really succinct. We're on top of the materials that are being produced. If we're seeing assets that don't work, well, let's go. Let's see what's next. Let's improve. So just keeping alive and looking out for things that don't work. I mean, it's not a failure. It didn't work. Well, let's improve it. Yeah.
Interesting. And I think as a final, question, the process seems to be pretty fun and interesting. Any tips? Any fun stories? Any things that you'd like to share with people listening?
Yeah, I think at first I would just like to stress that logos are really important for a brand, but I think sometimes people get too stressed out about them and they put too much emphasis on the meaning of a logo for a brand. And for us, what was really important is that we understood that the impression of a brand comes from more than just the logo. It comes from much more from your products and services. It comes from the connection of all of your touch points to create the full experience with the brand. That is ultimately what creates brand impression. And for us, the logo is important, obviously, because it's our signature, but we shouldn't push so much emphasis on it that it stresses us out through the whole process. We wanted to have fun with this process. It's a beautiful logo. It's really creative. We were making a really big impact. It was a really big step for the bank. And for us, it was important that we chilled out and had fun with it as well. And I think what really helped us to do that was understanding that, yes, the logo is important, but it's more important our products and services. It's more important our overall brand experience that connects all of the touch points with the user.
Interesting, very interesting. Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Heather. I think
pleasure.
this has been wonderful to know exactly, from the inside out how the design process of the logo came to be. And from my side, congratulations, both of you.
Thank you. And I would just say, as we were mobilizing the entire organization, communicate, over-communicate. If you think you've told Mexico, the next steps are this, say it 3 times, because you think that people know what's going on, and sometimes they don't. So it's better to tell somebody 3 times than leave somebody out of the loop.
Totally right.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.